podcast, Beyond Balance, that I started initially because I wanted people to realize that they could live a life beyond the balance that most people seek. And I met Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers a few months ago now, I think. And, you know, the serendipitous events that happen on social media, how people are connected, none of it is coincidence. It all is divine intervention. You're supposed to be in front of certain people at certain times. And if you pay attention and you're actually seeking miracles, they happen in front of your very eyes a lot more often than you may think. And so I really truly feel that us connecting on a much deeper level than we should, because we haven't had that many conversations, but like I instantly felt like we were in this together, in this lifetime together, helping women lead through this. And I'm so excited for this conversation today because I know that it's necessary. I know that it's not easy to lead. I know that it's not easy to lead after going through what we have with COVID over the last couple of years. Like nobody got out of that unscathed. And I want to call those of you that feel that intuition and feel that mission in your heart to listen today, to reflect, and to step into who you were meant to be, because often we just disregard those feelings, but you were born with that thought, you were born with that feeling, you were born with that mission. And so without further ado, Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers, would you please introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about you and your story?
I would be honored to, and I'm just honored to be here. I'm honored to serve, and I'm honored to be collaborating with my soul sister, because like she said, we met and it was like a lightning bolt came out of the sky. And I was just like, oh, I don't feel like I didn't know you before. I just feel like I found you again. That's what it felt like.
Mhm.
And I'm really excited to share a little bit about myself and my story. So I'm Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers. I am a health and longevity doctor. I'm Harvard trained. I have a PhD in epidemiology as well as degrees in psychology and public health. And I have a lot of traditional and non-traditional expertise. So as a research scientist, I studied the root causes of health issues, and that's one of my main areas of expertise. But I also had my own near-death experience 16 years ago. And short story version of that is I had a doctor in the mainstream system who basically poked a bunch of holes inside of me, left me bleeding internally, and then never bothered to tell me about it. And so rather than feeling like $1 million and walking out of the hospital in 72 hours, as he had told my family I would, I was in septic shock instead and hours away from losing my life. And I literally said goodbye to my family. I don't know why, my friend, but this morning I was actually really reflecting on the memory of what's happened to me right before my near-death experience and what that felt like, and how I remember just knowing I was dying because I was not even connected to my own body anymore. After that experience, it changed me. And I started to look at our healthcare system from a completely different lens, not just the lens of, the straight A perfectionist student who was on the straight and narrow path to be an MD and a PhD. That's what I was going to be a cardiologist. I was on a highly prestigious NIH training grant as becoming an expert in subclinical cardiovascular disease, something I am an expert at. And then everything changed. And along that journey, I learned that the Institute of Medicine estimated way back in 2006 that there's a 17-year gap between the time that we publish research and when it actually gets translated into the real world to help the people it's intended to. And I just felt strongly in that moment that getting my PhD, doing research, and staying in the ivory tower with the rest of my colleagues was just never, ever going to be good enough for me. And it just didn't feel aligned. So I fought my way through a very traditional environment as a square peg in a round hole. Yeah, and definitely a wrong hole definitely the wrong hole for a long time. Inside of those unhealthy environments, I'm happy to talk anytime about what it was like going through that patriarchal system as a woman with health issues, who was made abundantly clear too that I was in an environment where it was best that I keep my mouth shut, stay in my place, and pretend to not have health issues. So I was not supported. And so I know what it's like to exist inside of environments where you don't have the bandwidth. You cannot even have the bandwidth to feel healthy and whole. So after my near-death experience for 10 years, I battled chronic physical, mental, and emotional health issues. So you're not just talking to a highly trained expert, you're talking to a woman who has been there, done that. I have had every digestive symptom and diagnosis you could possibly imagine, from IBS to slow colonic transit to SIBO to candida to anxiety, depression, PTSD, chronic migraines, cystic acne, hormonal imbalances, autoimmune conditions. So I am no stranger to what it feels like to be stuck in the throes of your health issues. And quite frankly, on my journey, what I was looking for, Christina, all along was a practitioner to help me feel whole and healthy again. So that journey for me looked like starting in traditional medicine, where I bounced from doctor to specialist and constantly just being told, you're just going to have to manage it. You're just going to have to manage it, and being given prescription. And I was at this point loaded up with pills. I was taking tons of daily prescriptions for mental, physical, emotional conditions and issues. But I was already a training epidemiologist. So I knew, and I'm an expert at root causes. So I'm all along thinking like, okay, but you're telling me it's hormones, but what's causing the imbalance? Okay, you're telling me it's inflammation is the cause. So to those of you listening and watching out there, and I know it's a lot of you ladies who are being told it's hormones, it's inflammation, ding, 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 like problem solved. Those are effects, not causes. So there is something else creating inflammation in your body. There's something else creating a hormonal imbalance in your body, but nobody wanted to talk to me about that. And so the last GI specialist I saw, who told me I had no hope, she literally said, can we cure this about my IBS? No. Are you ever going to feel your best again? No. But you're just going to have to manage it. And then she drew me a triangle, which was really great because, you know, we put our health in geometrical shapes. And she drew me a triangle and showed me how I was right at the tip of the triangle, where my next step is to graduate to an autoimmune condition, as if that was like some kind of achievement. And I remember walking out the door, sitting in the car, bawling my eyes out and thinking, and time for something different. So I bounced from naturopath to Ayurvedic doctor to gut health specialist to, I mean, literally you name it, I've done it. And while those practitioners were giving me more pieces of the puzzle, that was still the bottom line. I was getting pieces of the puzzle, but all I wanted to do was feel whole and healthy. And I wanted one person to be like the quarterback and help me just step by step put myself back together again, mind, body, and spirit. And along the way, if I needed to see other types of experts, I wanted that person to be the one to say, hey, let's consult with so-and-so. Hey, let's go get a test over here. Let's collect some more information along the way to support you. And I never found that person. And the reason was because I was staring her in the mirror all along and I was too blind to see. And so that's why I started my practice, because we need the both and. We have all of our health practitioners are phenomenal, and we have the most advanced and extraordinary health care system here in the world. However, it does not and is not designed to create total health again. It's fantastic at catastrophic health issues. I would not be here today if it weren't for Western medicine. However, I also almost lost my life because of it too.
Right.
And it's great at managing, treating, and diagnosing. But when we want to be healthy and whole again, it's falling short. It's falling short, and we need something different. So we've got a lot of amazing practitioners over here who focus in like the external, the three-dimensional part of our health. And we've got a lot of amazing practitioners over here on the other camp who are helping us focus on the more energetic, the spiritual, the emotional. But again, where are we? Compartmentalized. And so I feel it's time for the both and. And so that's what I do. I help people create whole health from the inside out.
I am so grateful for this conversation for a few reasons. Number one, I've had a few friends that have faced death, and I can't say that for myself, but I can imagine that that changes everything immediately. There's a different appreciation for life. There's a different observation of time that you have left when that happens. There's a different set of priorities that come into place, and a different drive that you have when you face death and won. Sometimes I wish that like, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But sometimes I'm like, I wish I could have that perspective without living it, so that I knew the value of waking up every day. I knew the value, because we take all that stuff for granted.
We do.
And one of the things that I really love that you're talking about is this holistic approach. It was many, many years of me being sick, many, many years of me starving myself because I felt sick when I ate, and then I felt sick when I didn't eat. And then I was like, now what am I going to do? Right. Many, many years that I didn't have answers, and I would go to doctors and they had no answers for me, no answers, no tests. Well, we're not going to run that blood test. We're not going to do that. And finally I found a hormone specialist, that charged about $6 a minute to see her. And she helped me understand that I had something called celiac disease, and nobody told me that. No basic like GP had really heard of that at the time, way back 10 years ago, right? Whereas now it's like very, very common for gluten sensitivity.
But you're right. 10 years ago, it was very, very new. And I actually was in grad school at the time with a woman facing the exact same battle, who eventually discovered that was what was going on.
And you're like you think you're eating healthy. I would go to the gym. I kept gaining weight. There was no answer to me. And I was like, I thought at some point I had cancer. I was like, something is wrong with me and nobody can help me and nobody can tell me what's wrong. And like, it was very, very stressful.
Yeah.
And I can so relate to what you said. I was like, I just want somebody to advocate for me. I just want somebody in the medical system to be able to advocate for me. And, I had the same experience over COVID. We'll talk a little bit about COVID and the trauma that COVID caused, because it did cause a lot of health issues for people, but it also caused emotional trauma, which can lead to health issues. And, going through our medical system, I'm in Canada, or I was in Canada at the time. Now I'm in Mexico, so I can pay for private healthcare and have it immediately. But in Canada, that's not the case. And so I had 2 miscarriages in 2021 with not one person that saw me in person. They picked up the phone and they called me. They're like, okay, you can go and do this, and you can do, this is what's going to happen. And like, I had zero support in any of that. And I was like, this system, everyone thinks that we have free healthcare. This system is so broken. And I'm so pissed that I don't have the support that I'm looking to experts to have. And here you are realizing in all of this, in all of your seeking, that you were the expert that knew your own body the best. You had to really rely on yourself and your intuition. And that intuition for me got me to up and leave the country and go somewhere else where I know I get better medical attention. And I know that sounds crazy, but it was one of the deciding factors in that, like, I don't think I want to go through this again in Canada. So I would love to hear a little bit more and have a bigger conversation around the trauma that we've all experienced over the last couple of years, right? And how that can affect your health, your mental health, and the features that, or the symptoms that may come up in the process, right? Like, people are not necessarily connecting the dots on that, but we've all gone through this together.
Absolutely. We've all gone through it together. And I think each of us has had our own experience with it, but I don't think that it's I actually think about COVID as like a bad breakup. Like, how maybe you don't know how if you're listening, but I speak from personal experience, and I'm very transparent. And part of my health journey is I was in my past in an emotionally abusive relationship. So, how when you're in a bad relationship like that, and you go through it, and you're getting yourself through this challenging time in this situation. And I don't think when we're doing that we're realizing just how much damage is being done, because we're just going through it. We're just getting through it, one foot in front of the other. But then the breakup finally happens, right? Which is, I feel like, kind of where we're at now. And you get out of the relationship, and then you're on the other side. And for the first time, it starts to sink in, like, I got effed up from this experience, like pretty effed up. And then what do we do? So right now, what's happening, first of all, the life expectancy is now the lowest it's been in nearly 2 decades. We have an increasing prevalence of chronic health issues. So to those of you listening, I'm also an epidemiologist. So this is one of my areas of expertise, is the pandemic and everything that happened surrounding it. So first, before the pandemic started, we already had a skyrocketing prevalence, which just means rate of chronic health problems. Now the majority of our population is walking around broken and disconnected and not whole in some aspect, right? There are different aspects of our health and well-being. And I think this is showing up symptomatically for all of us in very different ways. I think for some of us, it's showing up internally in mental and emotional challenges. If you're a parent like you are, then navigating your family and your children as a steward through this on planet Earth, I mean, that in and of itself has created stress. And stress now in general, as something else I'm an expert on, is I think at a level of epic proportions in all of us. And I think now our nervous systems have all become so dysregulated because now think about this, our nervous systems, what they identify as safe is what are the experiences that we have most often that then become normal and familiar, right? So let's use an abusive relationship as an example. So why do some people have this trend of getting out of one abusive relationship and then bouncing to another and to another? Well, it's because your nervous system has become what's familiar to you. To daily being inside of an unhealthy and abusive relationship, your nervous system now deems that as safe and normal. So anything that exists outside of that experience is going to create symptoms inside your body in the form of maybe anxiety, of of feeling unsafe, of overwhelm, of stress and strain and emotional and mental exhaustion and pain. And we just go through these motions. So
they become normal, right? Like they become a habit and a standard that we live in because we've adjusted to it.
And so now our normal experience over these last 3 years has become stress. And we're just adjusted to it. But what has that done to us in the process? Well, first of all, it's created a society full of people who are stuck in sympathetic overdrive, which is, for those non-science people listening, there's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is that fight or flight response, which is meant as a defense mechanism, but it should not be turned on 24/7. But a lot of people are just existing here all of the time. And it's like our parasympathetic side, that nervous, that nice, calm, peaceful, it's like it's a dormant muscle that's atrophied and it's not even able to work or function because we're stuck up here. So we have become regulated to an unsafe, stressful environment. And now we all are adapting to thinking that we should just accept that as a normal part of life, of feeling that stress, feeling inside, of feeling that overwhelm. And over time, energetically, that is going to create even more symptoms, issues, problems, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And they will manifest in different ways in all of us. Some of us, I've talked to so many women lately that are going through GI stuff. Lots of us, that's our confidence, our center of power. And our power is being taken away from us. So it's coming up in these kinds of experiences. Also, we have, I think, I actually just read a research article about this yesterday. We have an increasing rate of loneliness. And I find that interesting because loneliness, not just in that a lot of us isolated ourselves quite literally in a physical way during the last 3 years, but a lot of us have have become separated from people we used to connect with. I feel like collectively, we are on this massive shift and transformation. And for some of us, I think us that identify as leaders and have that call to be a leader, I think I'm not necessarily saying it's been harder on us, but I think it's impacted us in a very particular way where that loneliness can actually manifest even when we're in the midst of being surrounded by other people. So it doesn't mean that you don't have friends, family, anyone to talk to, but it means there's a part of you that recognizes that there's something different about you that doesn't necessarily feel aligned in the same way with those people anymore. I think a lot of us as women leaders, I think that's why Christina and I instantly connected. It's like we're now all reorienting and finding our new tribes, but that is creating lots of feelings of loneliness along the path. So I think this is all manifesting in all of us in a lot of different ways, and those are some of them.
Yeah. And, I think when we talk about loneliness, I know that you've done some research
Mm-hmm.
on social isolation.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about like what, these lockdowns and like what all of these restrictions have done to people's mental health and
Yeah.
like how that's affected society?
Yeah. And I think that's important because it's May and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So, a really big, important topic. And, and let's face it, I come from the perspective that health is something that is whole, right?
Yeah.
One of my
Yeah.
favorite definitions of health is a complete state of physical, mental, social, and I would say spiritual well being, not merely an absence of disease or infirmity, which we tend to focus on the latter, right? I either feel good or I don't, and that's what makes me healthy or not healthy, but that's not it. It's that complete state, that whole health. And I think a lot of us now are starting to wake up to the recognition and awareness that it starts from within, because you can shine it on and look fantastic on the outside. And you can be eating all the right things, drinking all the water, staying hydrated, taking all the herbs and supplements, but it doesn't fix your soul. All the green juice in the world ain't going to heal your soul. And it's not going to shift your mindset, and it's not going to change your energy. Yes, to some degree, those things help. And I'm not saying they don't matter. It's the both and, right? I think a lot of people are waking up to the realization that it starts from within, because
Yeah.
we're starting to battle. But social isolation has actually been a growing public health problem since before the pandemic. Christina knows this. When we first met, I shared this story with her, but I actually proposed, because I'm a square peg in a round hole. I was constantly told I thought too far outside the box and too innovatively, because that's not what we want in science.
No.
We want everyone
No.
to we want to keep just doing the same thing over and over again and not fixing what's broken. But at the time, I had been doing my own independent research, because that's what I am. I'm a researcher at heart, and I'm a nerd, and I love to do it. And I could see in the emerging research that social isolation was coming out as a growing public health problem. And actually, that was one of the first dissertations I proposed that was shot down. And I was specifically pulled into a room when I said, look, social isolation is a problem. And I did still study social support and social isolation in my own way in my actual dissertation. But I, of course, had to play the game and play by their rules to be able to study what I really wanted and what I knew was important and that mattered. But it was an emerging problem then, and this was pre-pandemic. So we have a growing, and part of the reason, driving force behind that, is we have a growing aging population. So we have a lot of our aging adults and seniors going into different types of living situations. And so some of the social isolation gets clustered in those parts of our population, but not anymore. Not anymore. And so if it was a problem then, what do you think the research would show now? And isn't it interesting? You don't see any emerging studies about that, do you? Nobody's talking about what that's done to us. And it's really taken a toll.
Yeah. And so when we start to think about holistic health, I think a lot of the times we leave out our mental health of that piece. Like you said, like we either physically feel good or we don't. And a lot of what we feel comes from the emotional space. Like when I realized that like our gut health impacts our hormones, impacts our mood, and impacts all these things, it impacts our immune system. I was like, wait a second, why are we not screaming this from the rooftop? Why are we not telling everybody this and fixing this first over everything else? Like you might not be in a bad mood every day. You might actually just have poor gut health.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
you start to see things a little bit differently. Like when the veil's been lifted, you being told that you can't study this social isolation before the pandemic, and thinking, well, that's kind of odd. And, we'll let you guys put the pieces together on why that didn't, come into fruition. Right. But it's so important to understand that like you have to take authority, 100% authority on your own health. There is nobody out there that is going to advocate for you.
I think that's so important. And I think you're bringing up a really important point, which is that I think now we're in a space where a lot of people feel like victimized by what has happened over the last 3 years. And here's what I think an important message you and I have to share with everyone is that while it's not what's gone on over these last 3 years, no, it's not our fault, but now it's our responsibility. Now
That's
it's our
right.
responsibility to step into our power. And let's face it, as a society, and I think especially women, we've been trained over our lifetime to give our power away when it comes to our health and well-being, and not remember that the source that we can always trust has been right here all along. But we've been trained to become so disconnected from ourselves, right? So that's what happens when we're stressed. Then we're stressed, we're all up in our heads, we're in sympathetic nervous system overdrive, we're not regulating our nervous systems, and now all of a sudden I'm not even able to get to a place where I can feel safe and calm, and you're so dysregulated. And then all of a sudden all of that stuff creates negative emotions, right? We start thinking negatively, we start thinking, and those emotions and thoughts and stories we're telling ourselves about what we've been through, about horrible this happened to me, this happened to that, those all translate, like Christina just said, to feelings. And it's those feelings that really are the power, because they translate to our literal frequency and vibration. That frequency and vibration, we have research that backs this up that I could share with you. That frequency and vibration, quite literally, is how and why then our physical, mental, and emotional health continues to manifest the way that it does.
Yeah, it's so powerful when you start to think about it that way. There was a few things that I've learned in the last couple of years. I studied Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I studied a few others that were talking about, thought projection into your future, and like feeling energy. And what I realized so quickly over the last year is that we have the power to change in our mind all along. And I know that this is not a popular topic or one that is discussed often, but I've learned that the last few months, if you just raise your energy and you are so focused on raising your energy and your emotions and being emotionally intelligent and like, this is what I want and this is where I vibrate, the opportunities rise to where you are. Like, it all happens here first, and you need to act as if you're already there, right? And the reason I bring that up is because we're talking about being called to lead. You are going to face
Yes.
adversity. You faced adversity when you spoke out and said, I don't think that this is right. Like, I don't,
Yes, I did.
right?
I still
And that
do.
happens all the time, right? And especially with social media, if you're going to put
Yep.
yourself out there on social media, you're going to put yourself out there and be a leader. You are going to have people, you are going to be controversial no matter what you say, no matter what you represent,
Yep.
no matter what you know.
You
You're
will
going to be
trigger someone.
you will trigger someone or a mob of people or whatever it is. And right now, there are a lot of people that are angry, hurt, traumatized, and they don't know how to compartmentalize their feelings and
Yeah.
not project them, right? Because we need to be so set in who we are and
Yes.
how we can wholeheartedly help people that they're going to wake up over time. And by wake up, I just mean become more self-aware,
Yes.
of what they're projecting out there, right? Because you don't get what you ask for in the universe, you get who you are.
Amen, sister.
Right?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I think something important that you're getting at is back to this factor of stress. How can we be the kind of leaders we need to be for the world if we are stuck up all in here? We can't get to that place where we can just get aligned, connect with the truth of who we are. When we are serving in alignment, mind, body, and spirit, then all of a sudden, then you can really, the ripple effect of what you can do, even if you're already having success in whatever way you're leading, the magnitude of that just changes completely. But it's how and who you're being that's going to determine the results you're going to get. And I think that is so important, that we need to give ourselves permission to come out of that place of being stuck in chronic stress. You cannot connect to who you really are. You cannot truly lead. And don't you, I mean, think about it. When I think about the perspective of myself, when I seek out leadership, I mean, can't you feel the difference when a woman is aligned versus serving from a place where she's exhausted, broken, overwhelmed,
Yes.
stressed out? I'm in this place quite personally where I can feel that, and I cannot get support. I will not, I do not have space in my life to be supported by someone who is not aligned in that way. We have so many leaders. I can't tell you how many coaches I've had over the years who have had GI issues. I mean, I'm a health fanatic. So health is my highest value and I live by that. And I can't tell you how many coaches I've had who I've just witnessed going through all these kinds of issues in real time while they were working with me. And from at back in, years ago, I used to look at it from a different perspective, but now my perspective now on that is it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to be a leader who is broken. How can you really help anyone? We can only lead people to go as far as we've gone ourselves. So how can you, I just feel now it's a personal responsibility, not just to the people you serve, but to yourself. It really does start with us. And I feel like right now that we are, especially us women, being called to rise up to a higher level of leadership. And that is going to require a level of us that we are going to have to choose to take responsibility for stepping into. And I think it's important that those of us who are rising up together, like you and I, continue to do that, because we have to continue to support each other to be the healthiest versions of ourselves. We rise together, ladies. Like that is how we rise. And feminine collaboration, my friend Dr. Anita said this recently, and I love it. Feminine collaboration is the new domination. Like we are here as a collective to make change in the world. That's why so many of us have felt those feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and stuff over these past few years, because like I said, we're reorienting and finding each other. But I honestly right now feel like you're just doing yourself and everyone you serve a disservice when you're choosing to serve from that place that's broken and stressed out. And that energy gets projected out into the world too, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of maturity as you grow, emotional maturity and emotion
Totally.
and business maturity, right? Like I used to
Mhm.
sacrifice my sleep all the
Oh,
time.
always
I'm
at the
like, I'm
very
gonna,
beginning,
right?
especially. Mhm.
And so you run in circles and then you burn out, and then you run in circles and then you burn out, but you are doing a total disservice to yourself. And what would you say if a client behaved that way? Like what would you say if you're working with somebody and they told you what their lifestyle looked like and it was your lifestyle and you're like, wait a second, you can't do that. Like you need to take care of yourself. You need to take your own energy into consideration. You need to get your sleep. You need to get nutrition. You need to get some exercise, right? I sacrificed exercise for many years and I love that
Yeah,
feeling. And I sacrificed it because I was like, I can build business and I can be a mom and a wife, but I have no space in the middle to take care of me, right? And
exactly.
that
And we
is the
have to choose it.
disservice.
It is the
Yeah.
disservice. And we have to choose to make that space. Because to be honest, for as hard as it can be to hear, one thing I always say to my clients is everything we tell ourselves, everything we think is a story we make up in our heads.
Yeah.
Everything we think, the good, the bad, and everything in between, whatever you're perceiving it as, it's a story we make up in our heads. So if you're sitting there telling yourself the story that I'm too busy, or like Christina just said, well, I've got the business and the kids and my husband and the dog and the this and the that and the, and I have to do this house. I have to do this. Once I get these things taken care of, then I'll come over here. That's a story that you're telling yourself. And in the busyness of our lives, the thing we're sacrificing the most is our connection to and relationship with ourselves. And you said something really important, Christina, that and the other thing is when we hang on to that stress and those emotions and we don't allow ourselves to reframe it, to tell ourselves a different story, to shift a perspective, and we are determined to hang on to those stories, then you're just quite literally forming your own barriers and standing in your own way. And if you think about it from quite literally the digestive perspective, right? Like what happens when we eat food? We have to digest it, we have to eliminate it. And that's the cycle of nature. What makes you think it's any different with our emotions and our energy? But how much of that have we been hanging on to? And a lot of us with the trauma, especially, we decide I'm hanging on to that trauma and that story with a death grip. And at some point, if you don't allow yourself to digest those emotions, they will only be counterproductive. And once we actually allow ourselves to digest them and we shift ourselves to a place of more nervous system and better balance with ourselves, I feel like then what we do is we actually compost our own crap. And think about it. Like when we compost, We literally compost crap and garbage, but that actually turns into what helps us create better new life, regeneration. But you gotta let yourself compost your own crap. Can't hang on to it.
This is such a good conversation because, the generations before us, right? Like, I don't know if you grew up in this with your parents, but like,
I
it's
did.
like, right?
I still
it's
am.
like, quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about, right? And so like, I actually, for many years, wore it as a badge of honor that like, I'm not emotional. I don't cry. I'm a businesswoman and I'm not a crier, right? Like, or, be seen and not heard. And so like, don't say what you actually want to say. Like, don't say those things. And you get these filters that have been placed on you by other people around you.
Especially women, right? Like, that's not how women, this is how we show up. We don't want to come across as a bitch, but we want to be, like it's.
I was always too loud, right? Christina, be quiet. Christina, be quiet. Christina, be quiet.
I've always been too happy, too enthusiastic, too enthusiastic.
You're too much.
That was a really good, I got told this all the time in grad school. That was a really great talk, but could you tone down the enthusiasm next time? Do you have to use so many exclamation points in that email?
Yes.
Yes, these are the kinds of, yes, I did actually.
I'm really excited. And like, that's the thing.
Express myself.
We were like robbed of our emotions and robbed of our gift of processing.
Told we were wrong for feeling those ways.
Yes. And that it didn't show strength, right? It didn't show strength. And so it was so interesting. I think I was 32 or 33 when I first went to a counseling appointment, and she told me that I had PTSD. And I was like, no, isn't that something that like Army vets get and like first responders, right? And I'm just like, no. Like this is, and at the time I'd had a traumatic event and I was having a really hard time getting out of bed. And I didn't realize it had triggered from all of the years past. And I sat on it. I put a lid on it and I kept sitting on it. And I was like, you stay down there. I'm not willing to see this. And I remember the first time being in the room with her, and she's talking and I have this realization and I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to cry. And she's like, yeah, you should. Like, you need to cry to process these emotions, and you've bottled them down so far that you wake up nauseous every single day. Like you want to throw up because you're so disgusted with the fact that you have not processed these emotions. And I was like, I don't want to cry though. And she's like, what's the worst that can happen? She's like, you cry for 90 seconds, cry your heart out for 90 seconds, then it's over and you don't have to feel this pain anymore. So why don't you just do that instead of arguing with me about it? And I was like, oh.
You were literally like battling. And don't we do that though? Yes. We actually will argue for our own limitations, right?
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And so, as you start to open up to this feeling and the vulnerability that actually allows you to process and let go of some of the things, like I remember like looking back on experiences 14 years ago and being like, I wish I'd done this differently. Like, oh my gosh, we were not given the tools to become emotionally intelligent. We were not given the tools to process trauma ourselves, because most people are out there holding a grudge against somebody that someone did to them 5 years ago and realize you're not going to get that apology. You need to learn how to heal yourself so that you don't become a dick, right? Like, you've got to realize that this is your responsibility to heal all of things. And this is what you're talking about before. If you're in leadership, you must heal who you are so that you can lead. You need to heal to help other people. And if you don't, it becomes very, very transparent in different aspects of your life and your relationship and your health and all of these things, right? So we're so happy to have this conversation with you. I appreciate you. We'll have you back for sure. And I appreciate you coming and just like giving a holistic view of that, and giving people something to consider, right? Like, we are going through a time in this world that when we look back on this in 30 years, we'll be like, oh my God, we got through that. We led through that. We healed through that. We helped through that. And it's not easy. And it's not easy.
No, it's not. But isn't it really, think about it. We all picked to come here at this time.
I say it all the time.
Like, we are literally living through the history of mankind in a way that other generations have never, ever experienced before at all. And that is so important. It's going to change everything. And the one like paradigm shift I want to offer, like to leave us with, is that I think we've been trained to give our power away when it comes to our health and well-being. There can be this perspective or perception out there that it's something we have to go out and get or create, that it's something that eludes us. But
Right.
the truth is, there's a part of you, I don't care how you're feeling today, there is a part of you already inside of you right now that is healthy, that is optimally healthy and well, that is aligned in mind, body, and spirit. And from my perspective, we just get out of alignment with that. And it's just our job to help you come back into alignment with who you are, because it's not our job to tell you what to do. It's our job to help you find the answers that are right within you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much for this
Thank
conversation.
you
It is
so
so
much.
special to me. I appreciate you. I love you. We'll have
I
you
love
back again on the
you.
podcast. And if you guys want to find Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers, where can they find you?
Well, there's a couple of great places. I hang out a lot right now, social media wise, on Facebook. So you can find me there at Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers. And I actually have an incredible, speaking of everything we're talking about, I'm doing a free training in a couple of weeks on Monday, May 22nd. That is literally just called Demystifying Your Health Equation, Simplifying the Path to Whole Health and Well-Being. Because isn't that, we tend to complicate it, right? And what we're talking about today, it doesn't have to be so hard and complicated. And I want to give you all the tools, resources, knowledge you need to find what steps you need to take next to continue to be that healthiest version of yourself and step into that higher level of leadership. And you can also find me at my website, drelizabethrodgers.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, my friend. You guys,
Thank you
until
so
next
much.
time, we'll see you soon. Bye for now.